when Trump accused Obama of lacking Christian values on live TV. Nobody expected Obama to answer, with a single Bible verse, a verse so powerful it silenced the entire hall, and left Trump visibly rattled. The camera lights were almost blinding, cutting across a sea of faces inside a packed civic center in Phoenix, Arizona. This wasn't just another campaign stop, it was a nationally televised town hall, the kind that would be replayed on late-night news shows, and carved into memory. Every seat was taken. From the floor to the highest balcony, reporters lined the walls with cameras, laptops, glowing fingers ready to type every slip of the tongue. Viewers at home could feel the energy through the screen, the tension before something big. President Donald Trump sat at center stage, posture tall, chin slightly lifted, hands clasped together like a man ready to fight with words to his right. Former President Barack Obama waited calmly, almost motionless, as though he had been here 1,000 times before. He leaned back in his chair, shoulders loose, eyes fixed not on Trump but on the crowd, as though he were already in a conversation with them. The crowd was split. Some came wearing red caps and t-shirts with bold slogans. Others wore simple clothes, there for Obama, holding on to programs like souvenirs. When the moderator opened the event, the sound was deafening. Cheers clashed with jeers, whistles with clapping. It wasn't a town hall, it was an arena. What struck many watching was the noise, but the sheer contrast between the two men. Trump animated, leaning forward like a boxer. Before the bell, Obama measured, leaning back as if time itself had slowed for him. Two leaders, two styles, one stage. The moderator, a journalist from a Phoenix affiliate, didn't waste time, Mr. President, he said, turning toward Trump. Tonight the country is watching both of you, and the question many Americans are asking is about values, the moral foundation that guides leadership. What do you want to say to the man sitting across from you? Trump smiled tightly, gripping the mic, his voice cut sharp and fast. I'll tell you this, he began, jabbing a finger toward Obama. People talk about his legacy, they talk about his so-called values, but let me tell you something, folks. You can't lead a country if your morals are questionable, and believe me, his morals, they've always been in question. Gasps rippled through the hall. Some in the crowd applauded loudly, standing up with fists raised. Others sat frozen, mouths half open. Trump wasn't pulling punches. His tone carried accusation, almost like he was prosecuting a case before a jury of millions. Obama didn't move. He didn't flinch, didn't blink. Instead, he rested one hand on his knee and breathed out slowly, eyes still scanning the audience. It wasn't just restraint, it was strategy. Those who had watched him for years could tell he was waiting for the right moment. The moderator turned, sensing the tension. President Obama, do you want to respond? Before Obama even touched his microphone, the noise of the crowd swelled again. A woman sitting near the front row stood up and shouted, "Show him who you are." Applause thundered behind her on the other side. Trump supporters booed, some chanting his name. The camera swung across the divided crowd, capturing faces twisted in passion. America's split-screen politics, live and raw. Obama finally leaned forward, his fingers lacing around the microphone. He didn't speak right away. He let the noise carry on, fade a little, then fade more. Silence is a rare weapon, and he wielded it with precision. That pause, viewers at home could almost hear their own breathing. Families watching from living rooms in Tucson, El Paso, or Reno were glued to their screens. What would he say? Would he fire back? Would he defend himself instead? He smiled, a small, almost private smile, as if he was letting the room know he wasn't rattled. Look, Obama finally began, his voice low but steady, we're all here tonight because we love this country. And sometimes when we love something, we see it differently. We fight about it, but at the end of the day, leadership isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who can live with themselves. When the shouting stops, the words dropped heavy, the way a stone drops in water. Trump's smile faltered. The crowd leaned in. The moderator shifted nervously, sensing the air change. So you're saying, but Obama lifted his hand lightly, signaling he wasn't done, and everyone knew the real answer was coming. But what no one expected was how he would use a single line, not of politics but of scripture, to turn the moment on its head. Trump leaned forward in his chair, microphone clutched tightly, eyes narrowed toward Obama, like he had been waiting all night for this exact opening. The hall was buzzing with tension, though he didn't let it stall him. He thrived on conflict, and this was his arena. You know what Trump said, waving his hand dismissively as if brushing away the weight of Obama's calm words? That all sounds nice. It sounds like something you read off a card. But let it and be real here. People question your morals. Barack, they question what you stand for. They question your values, and I'll tell you folks, I've seen it. I've heard it. The Bible, Christian values, real American values. They're not in him. Not at all. Gasps. Then cheers. Then jeers. The room erupted on one side. Men in baseball caps jumped up clapping and yelling. That's right, as if Trump had landed the knockout punch already on the other side. Obama supporters booed so loudly. The moderator had to raise his hand trying to bring the chaos down. But Trump wasn't about to pause. He leaned harder into the microphone, his voice growing more forceful. This man, Trump continued, his finger jabbing in Obama's direction, talks about faith when it suits him, talks about values when it makes him look good. But when you look at what he did, the policies he pushed, the people he surrounded himself with, it doesn't add up. America deserves a leader whose morals are clear, not someone who hides behind fancy words. Obama tilted his head slightly as though the accusation itself didn't sting. But the tone revealed everything. He sat motionless, watching, waiting. His supporters in the crowd shouted back, a woman's voice ringing over the noise, "He's more Christian than you." The words cut through the hall, followed by a wave of applause. Trump's lips curled into a half smile, part annoyance, part satisfaction. "See," he said into the mic, gesturing toward the woman, "that's the problem. People are fooled. Fooled by speeches, fooled by his act. I'm not fooled, and I don't think America should be fooled either." The moderator looked uneasy, sensing the atmosphere pushing beyond control. "Mr. President," he interjected carefully, "the question was about values. But do you think—" But Trump cut him off. I think America's been played for 8 years. That's what I think. And now he wants to come back. Sit here, act like he's some saint. Give me a break. We need leaders who are real, not ones who quote scripture when it suits them." The irony was thick in the air. Trump was daring Obama to bring faith into the conversation, almost daring him to try to use the Bible as a defense. The crowd could feel it. Viewers at home could feel it. This wasn't about policy anymore. This was about something deeper, something personal. In a living room in Fresno, a retired teacher sat forward on her couch, muttering, Donald, careful." In a diner outside Tulsa, truckers, eating late-night burgers, turned up the volume on the mounted TV, forks frozen mid-air. In Phoenix, parents with kids in their laps held their breath, knowing their children were watching more than just politics. They were watching two versions of leadership collide. Trump wasn't finished. He raised his voice, letting it carry over the audience's noise. "Let me ask you something, Barack, and you don't have to answer if you're scared. But tell the American people this. What morals guided you when you ignored working Americans for 8 years? What morals guided you when you pushed policies that hurt the church?" The words were pointed, delivered with the energy of a man throwing punches, without gloves. The crowd responded in waves. Applause, shouts, boos. It was chaos. Exactly the kind of storm Trump thrived in. Obama still didn't move. He let the accusations hang in the air like smoke filling the room. The contrast was striking. Trump's chest heaving with intensity. Obama's shoulders still relaxed, hands folded loosely in his lap. It was theater. Yes, but it was also something more, a test of composure. The moderator finally turned to Obama, almost pleading with his eyes for balance. "President Obama," he said, "I think the country would like to hear your response." The room quieted just enough for Obama to lean forward, mic in hand. But he didn't speak yet. He glanced down for a second, looked back up at Trump, then at the audience, his expression unreadable for a moment. It seemed like he might let the words slide, that he might choose to ignore the provocation altogether. But the slight shift of his jaw, the faint lift of his eyebrows, it told a different story. He was going to respond. And when he did, it wouldn't just be words. It would be something that left a mark. But first, Obama would remind everyone in the room who he was. By the way, he entered the conversation calm, deliberate, and completely in control. The town hall had reached a boiling point. Trump's words echoed in the rafters, stirring anger and applause in equal measure. The moderator looked exhausted, already gripping his pen, as if that alone could steady the chaos swirling through the hall. Cameras zoomed in on Obama's face, searching for a reaction, waiting for something, anything that could break through the storm of sound. But Obama didn't rush. He adjusted the microphone slowly, letting the movement itself signal he was about to speak. The crowd began to hush in patches like waves, pulling back before the tide. He cleared his throat lightly, then leaned forward. "First," he said, his voice steady, calm, not raised an inch, "I want to thank the people of Phoenix for showing up tonight. Democracy doesn't work if folks don't show up." The hall erupted in applause, not wild but warm. His words were simple, but they carried weight in that moment. He wasn't just responding to Trump. He was addressed to everyone watching, from the people in the bleachers to the family huddled around a TV in Wichita, Kansas. Obama glanced briefly at Trump, then back to the moderator. Now he continued, the president raised a serious question about morals, about values, and I think that's worth talking about. Trump's smile flickered into something else, part irritation, part expectation. He shifted in his chair, drumming his fingers on the armrest, as if daring Obama to stumble. But Obama's tone didn't waver. You know, I've never claimed to be perfect. None of us are. But when you lead a nation, you don't start with perfection. You start with intention. You start with the values that guided you when no cameras were on, when no applause was waiting. The moderator leaned forward, sensing the room. Leaning with him, Obama let his words breathe, the silence between sentences, amplifying their power. He wasn't racing out shout, Trump. He was pacing himself like a marathon runner, who knew the finish line wasn't in sight yet. He lifted his eyes toward the audience. For me, those values came from my mother, who taught me about kindness, from my grandparents in Hawaii, who worked hard every day without asking for recognition. And yes, from Scripture. Because whether you call yourself a Christian or come from another faith, or no faith at all, there are truths that speak to every human heart. The words resonated across the hall. Even those hostile to him felt the sincerity in his voice. Some crossed their arms tighter, but they were listening all the same. Trump cut in sharply, raising his mic. Oh, here we go, here we go. He's gonna give a sermon. You had 8 years to prove those values. Barack in America saw the results. Don't act holy now. The interruption drew scattered laughs from Trump's supporters. Obama didn't bite. Instead, he nodded slightly, acknowledging the jab, before returning to the audience. You see, he said, calm as ever, when someone questions your morals, the easy thing to do is to fight back with anger, to throw insult for insult. But I think the harder, more important thing is to act. What do my actions say? What do the people who've lived under my decisions say? Because at the end of the day, leadership isn't measured by what you say in a debate. It's measured by the lives touched. When the lights are off, a man in the crowd shouted, "That's right." The applause grew louder, swelled until it drowned out the remaining hecklers. Cameras cut to faces in the audience. A young woman wiping her eyes. An older man clapping with both hands high above his head. Obama raised the hand, gently lowering the energy. Now President Trump says I don't live by the Bible. Well, I don't need to carry it like a prop. To know what's in it, I try to live by it. And it teaches us that strength isn't about shouting. Strength is about humility, integrity, sacrifice. For a moment, the room went silent again. Even Trump seemed caught off guard by the bluntness, leaning back slightly as if recalibrating. Moderator spoke softly, breaking the pause. President Obama, are you saying your faith guided your decisions in office? Obama smiled faintly. What I'm saying is that my faith, like anyone's, is a compass. It doesn't mean I never made mistakes. It means I tried to do right by people, even when it wasn't popular. Even when it cost me politically. That's what my mother would have wanted. That's what my faith asks of me. The hall erupted again. Applause, louder this time, surging through the rafters. The sound forced Trump to grip his mic tighter. Jaws set. He leaned forward, ready to counter. But the moderator raised a hand, knowing Obama still had the floor. Obama leaned back in his chair for the first time. Shoulders loose again. Eyes calm. He had set the tone. He had drawn a line in the sand, without raising his voice. Once the crowd knew it, Trump knew it. Viewers at home knew it. But Obama hadn't revealed his sharpest response yet. The verse that would freeze the room and shift the entire night. The town hall was no longer just another campaign event. It had turned into something deeper, something raw. A clash, not of policies but of principles. Cameras caught every bead of sweat, every flick of expression, every pause heavy enough to change the air in the room. Trump had thrown punch after punch. Obama had absorbed them all without raising his voice. Now it felt like everyone in Phoenix and across the country was waiting for the counterstrike. Obama leaned forward again, resting elbows on his knees, microphone balanced in his hands. He didn't rush. The crowd hushed without being told. A few voices still shouted from the far edges of the hall, but even they seemed quieter, as if waiting for the exact words he would choose. He glanced at the moderator, then back at Trump, who was shifting impatiently, tapping his fingers against the chair. Obama let the moment stretch, filling the silence with nothing but expectation. Let me tell you something, he began, voice steady, controlled. When you grow up, without much, you learn the value of listening. Before you speak, you learn to let others show you who they are, by how they treat people when nobody's watching. The words hung in the air, deliberate and slow. Now I know some people in this hall tonight don't like me. I know some watching at home don't trust me. That's part of democracy. But I'll tell you this, I never tried to divide folks by questioning their faith. Because the truth is,
Faith is between a person and God. None of us have the right to stand as judge and jury over another's soul. Murmurs spread across the crowd. Some clapped softly. Others nodded their heads. Even those who disagreed couldn't deny the weight of sentiment. Trump leaned forward sharply, his mic catching as he cut in. That's easy to say, Barack. But the fact is, you did plenty that hurt the church. Don't play innocent here. The moderator quickly interjected, Mr. President. Let him finish. Trump leaned back, scowling. But the damage was already done. Interruption only made Obama's calm seem stronger. Obama didn't react. He looked out across the sea of faces, then directly into one of the cameras, his voice dropping lower, almost intimate. I'll share something with you tonight. He said something I've carried with me a long time. Back when I was a young man in Chicago. Before I ever thought about politics, I worked with church groups, trying to help communities that felt forgotten. I saw mothers raising kids without support. I saw workers losing jobs they'd had for decades, and I saw how faith gave them strength when everything else was crumbling. It wasn't politics that gave them hope. It was scripture. It was prayer. It was the belief that character mattered, even when nobody else believed in them. The hall grew quieter still. The crowd leaned forward as if drawn by the gravity of his words. A camera zoomed in on a middle-aged woman clutching a program to her chest, eyes glistening. Obama paused, letting the weight of memory sit between them. All that's why he continued. When someone questions my morals, I don't feel the need to shout back. Because I know the life I've lived. I know the people I've stood beside, and I know the words that have guided me when I was lost. He stopped again. A long silence followed. The kind of silence that stretched into living rooms across the country where families sat, still waiting, barely blinking. Obama inhaled slowly, then exhaled. He raised his eyes, not at Trump, but toward the crowd. As whole, his voice softened, carrying a rhythm almost like a sermon, without ever becoming one. There's a verse I go back to often. He said, a verse that reminds me what real strength looks like, and I think it's worth sharing tonight. The moderator leaned back in his chair, sensing the shift. Trump's narrowed. The crowd straightened in unison, almost as if the room itself knew something defining was about to happen. Obama lifted the microphone closer to his mouth, paused and waited. The silence was electric now. A silence so full, so heavy that even the cameras seemed to hesitate before zoom closer in homes. From Bakersfield to Omaha, viewers felt the tension through their screens. Phones buzzed with text. Are you watching this right now? In diners across Texas, televisions had gone quiet as waitresses stopped pouring coffee to catch the moment. And then he spoke. The book of Proverbs says, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. The room froze for one long heartbeat. There was nothing. No cheers. No jeers. No shouts. Just silence. The words landed like a stone, sharp and immovable, echoing against the walls, and sinking deep in everyone who heard them. Obama lowered the microphone slightly, his face unreadable. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He just let the verse breathe on its own, confident that it needed no decoration. But silence cannot hold forever. And what came next was an eruption that would shake both men in very different ways. For a moment, the town hall felt like it had stopped breathing. The verse hung in the air, not rushed, not dramatized, just spoken. People in the crowd glanced at one another, some mouths open, others shut tight as though afraid to say anything out loud. A camera swept over the audience and caught the face of a young man with his hands clasped, whispering the words to himself, as if testing how they sounded when repeated. Trump blinked hard, leaning back into his chair, the smirk gone. His lips parted slightly as though he had an answer, but no words came. He gripped the microphone tighter, but he didn't interrupt. Not yet. Obama stayed perfectly still. The pause stretched thick and deliberate. He didn't need to explain the verse. He didn't need to raise his voice. He simply let its meaning sink in. Finally he lifted the mic again. Integrity guides us. That's what scripture says. Anger, not ego. Integrity. And when you forget that, when you start treating leadership like it's about you, and not the people you serve, you lose your way. That's true for anybody. Doesn't matter who you are or what title you hold. The applause began softly, a few hands clapping near the front rows. Like a wave it grew louder, spreading across the hall. People stood to their feet. Some cheered, some cried. The noise became so powerful that for nearly 30 seconds, Obama couldn't continue even if he wanted to. In living rooms across America, families leaned forward. A woman in El Paso whispered to her husband, "Did you hear that? A group of college students in Madison replayed the moment on their phones, instantly shaking their heads in disbelief. It wasn't that the verse itself was new. Millions of Americans had read it before. It was the way it was delivered. The timing, the calm that contrasted starkly with Trump's earlier storm. When the clapping finally softened, Obama spoke again. Faith isn't something you wear, like a badge when it's convenient. It's not something you pull out to win applause. It's how you live when nobody is watching. It's how you treat the people who can't give anything in return. That's what this verse means to me. And that's why when my morals are questioned, I don't feel the need to shout back. I'd rather let my life speak for itself. The moderator shifted in his seat, visibly impressed, but careful not to show it too openly. He looked at Trump, expecting him to jump in. But Trump remained stiff, fingers tapping against the mic. His expression dark. Obama turned slightly toward him. Not confrontational but steady. Mr. President, you asked about my morals. That's my answer. You don't have to agree with me, but you can't take away the words that have guided me all these years. Words older than both of us. Words that will outlast both of us. The crowd roared again, some rising for a second. Standing ovation. The energy was different this time. Not just cheers from his supporters, but respect from some who hadn't clapped before. Trump finally raised his microphone. His voice came out sharp, louder than necessary, almost forcing control back into his hands. Well, that's a nice little speech, you know, Barack, you're good with words. Everybody knows that, but let's not pretend quoting one line makes you the moral compass of America. It doesn't mean your record. We know the truth. His words hit the air, but the sting wasn't there anymore. The timing had shifted. The verse had already done its work, cutting deeper than a long defense ever could. Even those who cheered for Trump moments earlier seemed quieter now, hesitant, unsure. The moderator leaned forward carefully. President Trump, if I may. The audience seems to be responding strongly to President Obama's statement. Would you like to address the scripture directly? Trump frowned, caught in the question. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and muttered, look, I respect the Bible more than anybody. Okay, more than anybody. But quoting it doesn't erase 8 years of bad leadership. The response drew some applause from his corner of the crowd, but it lacked the punch. Cameras caught a young woman behind him, shaking her head, whispering to the person next to her. The contrast was undeniable. Obama meanwhile leaned back again, finally resting his microphone in his lap. His expression didn't change, but the atmosphere told the story. He had shifted the ground beneath their feet. The moderator exhaled and moved the program along. Gentlemen, we'll transition to questions from audience shortly. But before we do, I think we've just witnessed a moment people will be talking about for some time. The crowd clapped again, cameras flashing as the image of the two men on stage, one calm, one unsettled, burned itself into memory. But the real test wasn't just in the room. It was the reaction that would explode across America within hours, reshaping how millions would remember this night. The cameras caught every flicker of expression on Trump's face, his usual confidence, the sharp jab.
The smirks, the dominance of the room seemed momentarily fractured. The verse had landed harder than he anticipated. Obama hadn't raised his voice, hadn't attacked, hadn't even defended with policy. He'd simply quoted scripture, and in doing so he made Trump's accusation feel small. But Trump wasn't the kind of man to leave silence hanging. He straightened in his chair, leaned forward, and pulled the microphone closer. His voice was louder than before, a tone somewhere between anger and performance. Let me tell you something, folks. He began scanning the crowd like a salesman who refused to lose a deal. Quoting one line from the Bible doesn't prove anything. Anybody can do that. I can do that. That doesn't mean you lived it, and we all know, Barack, you didn't live it. That's the truth. His supporters clapped and cheered on cue, but the applause wasn't as strong as it had been earlier. It was scattered thinner. The cameras cut to the audience and revealed faces, unsure. Some with folded arms, others with eyes fixed on Obama. As if still processing his verse, Trump pushed harder. Look, I've been saying this for years. This man talks like a preacher, but when you look at the results, you see a different story. Churches struggling, families struggling, borders wide open, jobs leaving the country. If that's guided by the Bible, then maybe he was reading the wrong one. A burst of laughter erupted from his side of the crowd, but even that felt strained, more like a reflex than genuine humor. Obama didn't interrupt. He kept his hands folded loosely in his lap, eyes resting on Trump with an expression that wasn't smug but steady, like a professor watching a student try too hard to prove a point. The moderator, sensing the imbalance, jumped in. President Trump, are you saying scripture has no play in this discussion? Because earlier you challenged President Obama's faith directly. Trump waved a hand, scoffing, of course it has a place. I respect the Bible more than anybody. Everybody knows that. I mean, I've held it, I've read it, I've quoted it many times. But this guy, he jabbed his finger toward Obama again. He uses it like a shield and it's fake. Totally fake. Gasps rippled through the hall, louder than before. Calling another man's faith fake on national television was a risk, and the audience felt it. Obama slowly lifted his mic, his calm voice threading through the noise. Mr. President, you can call me many things, but fake isn't one of them. The people of this country know who I am. They've watched me for decades. They've seen my flaws. They've seen my family. They've seen my faith in action. And the truth is, nobody needs me to prove it to you. They've already lived it. The audience roared again. Some standing, some clapping, so hard, their hands turned red. Trump clenched his jaw, cutting in sharply. Oh, give me a break. You left this country divided, weaker, and everybody knows it. You can't just sit there quoting verses and acting like you're the moral high ground. You're not Obama. Didn't raise his voice. He let the applause die down, then leaned forward once more. Division doesn't start with disagreements. Division starts when leaders pit neighbor against neighbor. When they turn faith into a weapon instead of a guide. I've never been perfect, but I've never questioned another man's soul on national television. That's a line I won't cross. The statement drew a collective reaction. Applause, shouts, cheers. Even some who had cheered Trump earlier sat back. Visibly struck by the contrast, the moderator turned toward Trump again. Voice low but insistent. Mr. President, do you want to respond? Trump exhaled sharply into the mic. You know what? I don't need to respond. The American people know the truth. They know what I stand for. They know I've delivered more than anybody else in history. And quoting one verse doesn't change that. It was supposed to land like a hammer. But instead sounded defensive. Thin cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing the slight flush of his cheeks. The tight grip on the microphone. Obama leaned back again, shoulders relaxed, a faint half smile on his lips. He didn't gloat, didn't speak. He just let the moment linger. The moderator cleared his throat and addressed the audience. We'll move to audience questions now. But clearly this exchange has struck a chord with many of you. The applause swelled again, and the cameras cut to faces across the crowd. Some cheering, some thoughtful, some clearly shaken by what they had just witnessed in living rooms. On phones, in diners and airports, the clip was already being shared, already replayed. Obama's verse was traveling faster than Trump's rebuttal ever could. But the real storm was about to begin. Not in Phoenix but across the airwaves and headlines. As the country reacted to what had just happened, the time the town hall wrapped, the story was already running ahead of itself. Reporters in the press section typed furiously, their headlines forming before the candidates even left the stage. Camera crews scrambled to get reaction shots, capturing the emotional faces in the crowd, while anchor whispered in earpieces, that verse moment, loop it, lead with it. Within an hour, major networks had cut together clips on CNN. The chyron read, Obama fires back with Bible verse, crowd stunned. On Fox News, the headline was sharper, Trump confronts Obama on morals. Heated town hall exchange, MSNBC, the entire exchange almost uninterrupted. The commentators stunned at how a single line of scripture had flipped the atmosphere of the event. Social media lit up like wildfire. Twitter feeds filled with clips of Obama's calm delivery. The verse transcribed in bold fonts across countless posts. Hashtag spread instantly. Integrity show, Obama verse, Town Hall 2025 on Facebook Live. Streams from Phoenix spread across timelines, with comments pouring in at lightning speed. One viewer in Oklahoma wrote, that verse hit me harder than anything I've heard in years. Say what you want about Obama. That was real. Another countered, Trump's right, quoting scripture doesn't make you moral. Don't be fooled, people. Cable pundits rushed to dissect every word in a studio in Dallas. A conservative commentator argued, Obama is a skilled performer. He knows how to use timing, how to use silence. Tonight, he used scripture to make Trump look rattled. But don't forget, Trump's point was about actions, not words. Across the table, a liberal analyst shook his head. No, this was more than performance. This was composure versus chaos. Obama didn't need to shout. He let the verse do the talking. America saw the difference on late-night talk shows. Comedians had a field day. One joked Trump wanted to fight Obama gave him Sunday school. Another quipped, who knew Proverbs could trend harder than Taylor Swift? But outside of pundits and comedians, the reaction that mattered most came from ordinary Americans. In Des Moines, Iowa, a group of farmers gathered at a local bar, replayed the clip on a phone. One older man, his hands still rough from the fields, shook his head. I didn't vote for him back then. But I'll tell you this, that verse was the truth. You can't fake that kind of calm, younger man. Across the table disagreed. Nah, Trump's right, words don't change anything. Actions matter. Their debate carried on late into the night, mirroring conversations happening across the country. In Fresno, California, a retired nurse called her daughter after watching the replay. Her voice cracked as she said, "Honey, that verse reminded me of your grandfather. He always said integrity was everything." I haven't heard a leader talk like that in years. In Birmingham, Alabama, a group of college students discussed it between bites of pizza. One student leaned back and said, "It wasn't about politics for me. It was about character." The way he said it, like he really believed it, that sticks, even in places where Trump held strong support. People admitted the moment landed. A trucker in Amarillo texted a friend, not an Obama fan, but damn, that verse hit. By the next morning, newspaper headline carried the story coast to coast. Obama's scripture shifts tone of town hall, wrote the Arizona Republic. Trump Obama clash over morals in Phoenix, said USA Today. The New York Times framed it as a moment of contrast. A verse, a pause, and a president left searching for words. Talk radio hosts spent hours replaying the exchange. Callers lit up the lines. Some praised Obama for his calm. Others ridiculed him as rehearsed, but either way, nobody could deny that it had struck a chord. On Instagram, clips of the verse were set to background music, reshared thousands of times on TikTok. Teens stitched reactions, some quoting the verse back to the camera with captions like "Say what you want." This was powerful. Even faith leaders entered the conversation. A pastor in Dallas posted a video saying, "When Obama quoted Proverbs, I heard conviction. Whether you agree with him or not politically, that's the kind of reminder this country needs." A televangelist countered the next morning, arguing Obama was using scripture for political theater. The debate spilled into pulpits, podcasts, and Sunday sermons. The most telling shift, however, came in polling overnight. Flash polls taken by news organizations showed a bump in favorability for Obama's performance. At the town hall, among undecided voters, many cited calmness and moral conviction as reasons they leaned toward him in that moment. Trump's base still stood firm, but the cracks in the broader audience were visible. In living rooms, coffee shops, churches, and workplaces, the verse became a reference point. "Did you hear what Obama said?" became a common question. People weren't just talking about the town hall. They were quoting scripture at water coolers and classrooms, on job sites. The ripple was cultural, not just political, but beyond headline and hashtags. The story was personal. The verse touched lives in ways no one could have predicted, sparking reflections in households across the country. The power of a single verse didn't just echo in headlines or fill television screens. It sank into living rooms, kitchens, and car rides across the United States, stirring something personal in people who hadn't thought about politics or even scripture in years. In Dallas, Texas, a single mother named Marlene had just finished her night shift at a hospital. When she caught the replay on her phone, she sat at the edge of her bed, scrubs still, her hair tied back messily. Exhaustion written across her face, the words "the integrity of the upright guides them" ran through her mind as she thought about her kids, asleep down the hall. She whispered to herself, "That's what I want them to know." Integrity. Tears welled in her eyes. Not because she was an Obama supporter or a Trump critic, but because the verse reminded her of the promise she'd made years ago to raise her children with honesty. No matter how hard life got. Hundreds of miles away, in Dayton, Ohio, a retired veteran named Clifford watched the exchange from his recliner. He had served in the Marines for 22 years and considered himself deeply patriotic. But he wasn't a man who got swayed by speeches that night, though he sat still, remote in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. The moment Obama delivered the verse, Clifford leaned back slowly and said, out loud, "That's it, that's what we're missing." His grandson, sitting on the floor with a game controller, asked, "What do you mean?"
Grandpa Clifford pointed at the television. Integrity, son. Without it, all the power in the world doesn't mean a thing. The boy nodded, maybe not fully understanding, but the memory etched itself into his mind. New Orleans. A group of college students huddled in a dorm lounge replayed the clip on a laptop. They weren't particularly religious. Some not at all. But one of them, a young woman named Ayesha, leaned forward and said, "You don't have to believe to feel that. That's about how you live. Not what you say." Her roommate added, "Crazy how one verse can make a whole room go quiet." For them, it wasn't about politics, it was about witnessing a reminder of something their generation often felt was missing in leadership: sincerity. Stories like these multiplied across the country. A barber shop in Detroit buzzed with conversation. The next morning, customers quoting the verse back and forth as clippers hummed in the background. In a church basement in Topeka, Kansas, parishioners gathered for Bible study debated whether Obama's use of scripture was genuine or strategic, yet even those skeptical of his politics admitted the words hit home. One older woman summed it up: "Maybe it was rehearsed, maybe it wasn't, but scripture doesn't lose its truth just because a politician says it." Faith leaders felt compelled to respond. Pastor Raymond Lewis, from Tulsa, uploaded a video to his congregation's page, saying, "Scripture is sharper than any two-edged sword, and tonight, America saw that truth live on television." The video racked up tens of thousands of views within hours. Meanwhile, in Charleston, South Carolina, Reverend Gloria McIntyre told her congregation, "Don't get caught up in who quoted it. Ask yourself, are you living it?" Her words drew nods from pews filled with families, teenagers and retirees. Even skeptics who rolled their eyes at Obama's politics found themselves talking about the verse at a diner outside Boise, Idaho. Two truckers sat across from each other over steaming plates of eggs, said, "I still don't like the guy." But quoting Proverbs in front of Trump took guts. The other shrugged, then smirked. "Yeah," and it landed. Their conversation drifted back to work, but the moment lingered with them. Not all reactions were warm. Some conservative bloggers called it manipulation, argued that Obama weaponized scripture to score political points on talk radio. One host sneered, "Don't be fooled, folks. That verse was aimed like a bullet. He knew exactly what he was doing." But even in criticism, they admitted the moment worked. Meanwhile, for families sitting quietly in their homes, verse became something to talk about with their children. In Omaha, Nebraska, a father at the dinner table repeated the line for his two teenage daughters, "Integrity guides the upright." He explained, "That means doing the right thing even when nobody's watching." His youngest asked, "Like when I cheat on a test, even if the teacher wouldn't notice?" He smiled. "Exactly, that's worth more than any grade." The night in Phoenix had started as political theater, but the ripple had become personal for some. It reignited faith for others. It stirred memories of family lessons for many. It was a reminder that leadership wasn't about volume or power. It was about character. But personal stories were only part of the picture. The larger question hung heavy. What did this moment reveal about the deeper moral contrast between the two men, and the lesson America might carry forward? By the following week, commentators had run out of new ways to describe the town hall. They replayed the clip endlessly, some praising it, others dissecting it, but all agreeing on one thing: it had shifted something beneath the media frenzy and social chatter. Ordinary people kept returning to a simple truth: the stark difference between two men, not in their politics but in their approach to character. In Phoenix that night, everyone had seen it with their own eyes. Trump came in like a fighter, fists up, swinging hard. Obama stayed rooted, quiet, steady, leaning on words older than the Constitution itself. The moment crystallized what many had felt but couldn't articulate: leadership isn't about who wins the loudest argument, it's about who stands firm when questioned, who shows patience when insulted, who remembers the weight of words when others toss them carelessly. The verse from Proverbs had turned the debate into a mirror. On one side was Trump's reaction, dismissive, defensive, sharp-edged. On the other was Obama's posture, calm, deliberate, anchored in something beyond the stage. Viewers at home compared the two and felt the lesson almost instinctively. A retired teacher in Spokane told her friend could put politics aside for 1 second and just see it. One man relied on ego, the other leaned on principle. In classrooms, the verse showed up on whiteboards. A civics teacher in Flagstaff wrote it across the top of his board the next morning: "The integrity of the upright guides them. Unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity." He asked his students, "What does this mean?" Outside of politics, the answers came quickly. It means being honest at work. It means not betraying a friend. It means doing the right thing. When it's hard, that was the point, he explained. Character is a compass, a campaign tool. Even critics who despised Obama's politics couldn't deny the clarity of the contrast. A columnist in St. Louis wrote, "Say what you want about his record, but on that stage, Obama reminded America of something rare: restraint, the ability to answer criticism without venom for many." Moral was simple, but profound. It wasn't about left versus right, blue versus red. It was about what kind of example leaders set. When the spotlight is harshest, leadership built on anger can stir a crowd. Leadership built on integrity can outlast it. Obama himself never gloated afterward. At a post-event interview with a local station, he shrugged when asked about the verse. "It's one I've carried with me a long time." He said, "I don't think quoting scripture makes me better than anyone. I just think sometimes it reminds us of what's important." His voice carried the same calmness as the night before, reinforcing the idea that his delivery wasn't theater. It was habit. Trump, on the other hand, doubled down at a rally in Las Vegas days later. He mocked the moment Obama thinks quoting a Bible verse makes him a saint. "Give me a break, I could do that too. Watch this, an eye for an eye." The crowd cheered, but outside the arena, clips of the joke circulated online, compared side by side with Obama's steady delivery. The contrast only grew sharper. The moral people took away wasn't scripted by strategists or written in op-eds. It emerged in conversations between neighbors, parents, and chilled friends over coffee. It was about humility versus arrogance, patience versus provocation. It was about how real strength doesn't always look like power. Sometimes it looks like restraint. A grandmother in Kansas City told her granddaughter that night, "Reminded me of your grandfather. He never raised his voice, but when he spoke, people listened, not because he was loud, but because he meant it." A factory worker in Bakersfield put it more bluntly. Trump swung hard, but Obama didn't need to swing back. He just stood there, and somehow that hit harder. The town hall revealed something deeper: politics, the hunger people have for leaders who lead with moral clarity. Leaders who don't just talk about values but embody them in the hardest moments. It's a lesson as old as scripture itself. Power built on noise fades quickly. Power built on integrity lingers long after the cameras shut. But as much as the night left people reflecting, it also left them asking, what now? Could America take this lesson forward, or would it just fade into another viral clip? The answer lay in how people chose to carry it into their own lives. When the dust settled and the cameras shut off, Phoenix Town Hall became more than just another chapter in America's political story. For millions of people, it turned into a parable about leadership, faith, and the weight of words. The memory of that single verse, spoken calmly without theatrics, lingered longer than the shouting, longer than finger pointing, longer than the sound bites that usually vanish by sunrise in the weeks that followed. The moment was replayed in Sunday sermons, on kitchen radios, in classrooms, and even in break rooms at factories and offices. Some people argued about whether Obama had been sincere. Others insist it was calculated, but sincerity or not, the verse refused to disappear. People remembered it because it touched something more personal than politics. In Phoenix itself, one local paper ran a series of letters from readers about what the town hall meant to them. A father wrote, "I watched with my sons, and when Obama quoted that verse, I paused the TV. We talked for 20 minutes about what integrity means. I don't know who I'll vote for next year, but I do know that talk with my son mattered more than politics." Another reader confessed, "I was ready to tune out, sick of the noise, but that verse made me stop scrolling on my phone and actually listen. I haven't done that in years." It wasn't just the words that mattered, it was the posture. Obama showed that in a world full of shouting, silence still had power. In a climate where insults were currency, patience could still buy trust. That contrast resonated far beyond one night on stage, and the truth is, that's the deeper lesson here. Leadership isn't just about winning arguments or proving opponents wrong. It's about the way a person carries themselves when challenged, about what values anchor them. When the ground shakes, anyone can yash, anyone can point fingers, but it takes a different kind of strength to pause, breathe, and let principle guide the response.
Think about your own life. How many times have you been tempted to shout back? When accused, how many times has anger felt easier than patience? That night in Phoenix, remind millions that real integrity isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It speaks for itself. Just as clearly in a family kitchen, as it does on a national stage. Even Trump's defenders, who argued that Obama's verse was nothing more than political theater, had to admit something important. It worked. It did just land in the room. It traveled. It reached people who hadn't watched politics in years. It started conversations between grandparents and grandchildren, between teachers and students, between co-workers on their lunch breaks. In that sense, the verse did something rare. It bridged divides, if only for a moment, by pointing to something deeper than party loyalty. The universal hunger for leaders, with character, and maybe that's the most enduring takeaway. Politics will always be messy, elections will always be heated, leaders will always clash, but the values that guide people, honesty, humility, integrity, are what shape the legacy they leave behind. Obama's calm delivery of Proverbs reminded people of that. Trump's reaction reminded them what happens when ego drowns out principle together. The two men gave the country a stark picture of choice, the volume of pride, or the quiet strength of integrity. For you, the viewer, the challenge is simple. Ask yourself, when the noise rises, what do you stand on? When your morals are questioned, what speaks louder, your anger or your integrity? That's not just a question for politicians, it's a question for parents, for workers, for students, for all of us. The Phoenix Town Hall may fade from the headlines, but the lesson shouldn't. Character outlives applause, humility outlasts power, and integrity, it will guide you long after the cameras shut off. So as you leave this story, carry that question with you. What will guide you when nobody's watching? If stories like this one made you think, if they made you pause and reflect, don't just let it end here. Hit subscribe, share this video with someone who needs the reminder, and keep this conversation alive, because in the end, what we remember most aren't the loudest voices, but the ones that spoke truth with quiet conviction.